All right, so we've looked at extruding objects or extruding faces in order to make some extra detail. We've looked at inserting edge loops to get some extra detail. The next thing I want to look at is how to take two objects and kind of combine them together, right? Sometimes it's really hard to make a complete object all on its own, right? You might be making a character or a person, and you might decide to make the hand independently of the rest of the body. It's a very common technique. It's easy. It's better to do in a lot of cases. But you have to somehow connect that hand to the body. So what we're going to do in this video is learn how to connect two different objects. Now I'm going to use two cubes just for the simplicity, but you're not always connecting things that are this clean. But we will go through the process and we will figure out how to do it. And then kind of in the tutorial this week, we'll look at something a little bit more in depth. It's still not going to be very difficult. So we have two objects here. And when you go into edit mode, whichever object you have selected, that's the one you can work on. The other object is just kind of sitting there in space, which isn't great because in this example, we want to actually be able to work on both of these at the same time because we are going to try to connect them together. So in order to do that, what you want to do is click on one object, hold down Shift, and click on your second object. You might have 3 objects or 4 objects or 50 objects. It doesn't matter. You can hold down Shift, select more than one object, and then you're going to come up to the Object tab, and you're going to say Join. Now what this does is this allows the two objects that you've created before to be treated as if they're one object. And now we just have to figure out how we're going to connect these things together. Well, like most things in Blender, we're going to go ahead and go to edit mode. And then what I want to do is I want to know where I'm going to connect them. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these two faces together. And I'm doing that just to get kind of the shape that I want. We looked at this at the beginning where we had 2 boxes. We put them together and then we moved the individual vertexes in the middle. I want to do that again, but I'm not going to want those vertexes to be separate. I'm going to want them to be combined. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and I know that I don't want interior faces. So if I were to combine these together right now, I would have these two faces inside of my model. You never want to have faces inside of your model because even though you can't see them, the software is going to be trying to render them. So when we're talking about optimization and making things game ready and having a game model versus a high detail model, or maybe even we'll call it a low poly model, deleting all the faces that you don't need is really important. So in this example, we're going to delete the faces here in the middle. In order to do that, you hold down Shift while you're in face mode, select the two faces and press delete on your keyboard, and then choose faces. So now both of my objects have a big hole in the middle here where they have had a face removed. And what we want to do is select the vertexes, and we want to combine those vertexes together. Now we could just move them really close together, but that's not going to be super beneficial to us because they're still going to act independently of one another. But I am going to go ahead and move them really close together to begin with, just because I think that's a good way to start. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I have basically 4 sets of vertexes, I'm going to click and drag over one set. And that way I know that I've selected both of the vertexes. And then I'm going to come to Mesh in the Options menu of Edit mode. I'm going to come to Mesh, and I'm going to say Merge. And you can merge them at the center, at cursor, at collapse. Normally, at center is the only option you're going to need. That's going to try to get the two vertexes that you've selected to merge exactly in the middle of where they are. And if you've put them really close together, that's usually good enough. If they're kind of far apart, then when you select it and you do the merge at center, then it might be kind of off. So you can choose one and just select that one last, and then come to come to Mesh and Merge, and merge them at last. And that'll move everything that you selected to the last vertex. But again, I like trying to get them as close as I can to begin with, and then merging at center. All right, so again, separate them. For the most part, you'll select two vertexes and mesh and merge at center. There are other ways to do this that may be a little bit faster, but for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to focus on selecting two verts and then merging them together. For the project that we're going to work on, that's kind of what we're doing, and it's not the fastest way to merge a lot of vertexes, but it is the most consistent way to merge individual vertices. So that's what we're going to work on for the project. So we've looked at extruding, right? So we're going to select a face. We are going to extrude the face by face and extrude faces and pull it up. There's also other tools over here. You can select extrude along an axis, right? This does very similar to the extrude faces tool that we've already used, but it's just a button instead of coming up to face and extrude faces. Sometimes that's easier. You can also use an inset faces. And this is cool because this gives you different features, right, that you could get from going to face and extrude faces and pulling it out and then scaling it down. But using that inset faces right here kind of automatically does that for your face. You just scale it down. But all of those are just extrude tools. The other tool we looked at was a loop cut, or I would call it an edge loop, inserting an edge loop. And you just click on the actual edge you want to slice, and it goes all the way around the object. It makes an edge loop. And again, this is really useful, both of these techniques, for adding detail and getting more geometry. In this video, we looked at if we have two objects, but this could also be something where maybe you've made a mistake. So we'll look at that. Maybe you did what I just did. You added in this extra face, and you don't want that face anymore, right? So we're going to go to the face selection tool. And we're going to come through and we're going to delete all of these faces that we don't want. Delete them all. So now I have this giant hole here, right? But I didn't want those faces, so now I need to come in and select the vertexes. And I need to connect this vertex to this one, and so forth and so on, all the way around. Mesh and merge at center. Now, when you're doing this, sometimes it's a real pain in the butt to come up to mesh and merge at center. So you can select your two faces or your two vertexes and hit G on the keyboard, and G will repeat the last action that you took. In this case, my last action was merging two vertices to the center. So I hit G, and G will repeat that action. So I don't have to go up to mesh and merge at center again every time. I can just select two and press G on the keyboard. And in this case, I don't want to forget the bottom. And now I've actually improved the model to a position that I wanted it to look like. And I got rid of a lot of faces that I didn't need. So that's it. That's just combining objects together. You delete the faces you don't want, and then you merge the vertices. Ideally, you're going to do this maybe kind of early on. You don't want to add a ton of detail to your objects, just because going through and selecting vertices like that is kind of a pain. But there are other ways to do it, like mass merges, but we'll look at those a little bit later. So that's what we've got, and we'll see you in the next video for the tutorial.